What's up everyone, my name is Augustine, I am a musician and a massive fan of the Beatles, and this YouTube channel is actually dedicated to my favorite band, the Beatles. So if you like the Beatles, make sure you subscribe and you check out my other videos because you're definitely gonna find them interesting. So in today's video we're gonna talk about the fifth Beatle. Who was the fifth Beatle? Well, actually, no one was. There were 4 of them, everybody knows that. However, according to Wikipedia, the fifth Beatle is an informal title that has been applied to people who were at one point members of the Beatles or people with a strong association with John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison and Ringo Starr. The fifth Beatle claims first appeared in the press immediately after the band's race to global success in 1963-1964. Now, who was the fifth Beatle? Well, that's the thing, that's why I'm making this video. There are different candidates. Some people said it was Brian Epstein, some people say it was George Martin. So in today's video, we're gonna talk about all the potential fifth Beatle candidates and tell you a little bit about each one of them. And then towards the end of the video, I'm gonna tell you who did Paul McCartney and George Harrison think that should be considered the fifth Beatle. And then I'm gonna tell you who do I think should be considered the fifth Beatle. Not that it matters, but you know, I'm making the video, so I might as well. You can potentially let me know in the comments as well, who do you think was the fifth Beatle and why? So we're gonna start with George Martin, the producer of the Beatles. Sir George Henry Martin was born in London in 1926. He was an English musician, record producer and conductor. He was commonly referred to as the fifth Beatle because of his intensive involvement in each of the Beatles' original albums. Martin's formal musical expertise and interest in new recording practices facilitated the group's rudimentary musical education and desire for new musical sounds to record. Most of their orchestral arrangements and instrumentation were written or performed by Martin, and he played piano and keyboards on a number of their records. George Martin sadly died on the 8th of March 2016 at the age of 90. So George Martin really knew what he was doing as a record producer. He was amazing, he knew a lot about music, and as I said, you can hear him play piano and keyboards on many of the Beatles records, like just to give you an example, the solo in Lovely Rita or Rocky Raccoon. And he was like an authority figure as well for the Beatles. He was about 10 years older and they all respected him a lot, and he guided them to create amazing music. If you want to know more about George Martin, there is a documentary called Produced by George Martin that I definitely recommend. Okay, let's move on to our candidate number 2, which is no other than Brian Epstein, the manager of the Beatles. Brian Epstein was born on the 19th of September 1934. He was an English music entrepreneur who managed the Beatles from 1962 until his death in 1967. Brian Epstein was born into a rich family of successful retailers in Liverpool, and he owned a record shop in the city centre. He heard a lot about the Beatles and he went to the Cavern Club to see the Beatles play their lunchtime set, and he decided to sign them. He encouraged them to ditch their scruffy outfits and to wear suits and to behave properly when they were on stage, like no smoking, no swearing and things like that. And he knocked on every door for the Beatles to be heard. They got rejected many times until he finally got a record deal with EMI. They recorded at EMI Studios, now known as Abbey Road Studios, with producer George Martin. And from that point on, the Beatles became a massive success. The Beatles relied a lot on Brian Epstein, and they all recognized their importance in the Beatles' success. Brian Epstein, in my opinion, could definitely be considered the fifth Beatle, and his death in 1967 came as a shock to all 4 Beatles, and things started going downhill pretty much from that point on, leading to the Beatles breakup. I'm not saying that's the number 1 reason why the Beatles broke up, but that probably helped. Okay, moving on to our candidate number 3, we have Billy Preston. William Preston was born on the 2nd of September 1946. He was an American keyboardist, singer and songwriter. Preston was a top session keyboardist in the 1960s, during which he backed artists such as Little Richard, Sam Cooke, Ray Charles, the Rolling Stones and the Beatles. Preston is one of 2 only non-Beatle musicians, along with Tony Sheridan, to be given a credit on a Beatles recording at the band's request. The group's 1969 single Get Back was credited as The Beatles with Billy Preston. He continued to record along George Harrison after the Beatles breakup, along with some other artists like Eric Clapton and the Rolling Stones. On the 12th of May 2021, the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame announced that Preston would be inducted with the Musical Excellence Award. Billy Preston died on the 6th of June 2006. Now, we all know Billy Preston for playing with the Beatles on the album Let It Be, that initially was called Get Back. He joined the Beatles for the rooftop concert where they play songs like Don't Let Me Down and Get Back and Dig a Pony. And if you watch the Get Back sessions, you can see a lot of Billy Preston as well. Should Billy Preston be considered the fifth Beatle? I don't know. Let's see. Okay, time to move on to our fourth candidate, which was at some point quite literally the fifth Beatle. And of course I'm talking about Stuart Sutcliffe. Stuart Beatle Sutcliffe was born on the 23rd of June 1940. He was a Scottish painter and musician, best known as the original bassist of the English rock band The Beatles. Sutcliffe left the band to pursue his career as a painter, having previously attended the Liverpool College of Art. Sutcliffe and John Lennon are credited to inventing the name Beatles. John Lennon and him were very good friends from the Liverpool Arts College. And initially he wasn't really a musician, he was a painter, he was quite talented. John and Paul pursued him to buy a bass guitar because they needed a bassist. He bought a Hofner bass and they went straight to Hamburg. He wasn't a very talented musician, Paul McCartney didn't like that, and sometimes he wouldn't face the audience because he didn't want anyone to tell that he wasn't playing the right notes on the bass guitar. In Hamburg, he met this German girl called Astrid, and he decided to stay in Hamburg with her, leaving the band. And that's why Paul McCartney took the bass. Stuart sadly died on the 10th of April 1962 in Hamburg, at the age of 21. Should he be considered the fifth Beatle? I don't know, maybe. I mean, he was quite literally the fifth Beatle, there were 5 of them, so let's see, why not? You tell me. Which brings us to our last candidate for now, which is Pete Best, the first drummer of the Beatles. Peter Best was born on the 24th of November 1941. He is an English musician who was the drummer of the English rock band The Beatles from 1960 to 1962. He was dismissed immediately prior to the band achieving worldwide fame and is one of the several people to have been referred to as the fifth Beatle. It was George Martin, the producer of the Beatles, who suggested the Beatles needed a new drummer if they want to get signed, because apparently Peter Best wasn't quite the best. He struggled for a few years after being kicked out of the band because, as you can imagine, I don't think it would have been easy for him, but eventually he said that the circumstances of being kicked out of the band eventually led him to meet his wife and form a family. So he was happy in the end, kind of. Should Peter Best be considered the fifth Beatle? I don't know, maybe. Now, those are, to me, the most important candidates. However, let's see what the Beatles said. Now, when the Beatles got inducted to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1988, George Harrison said that if someone should be considered the fifth Beatle, it should be either Derek Taylor, the Beatles' public relations manager, or Neil Aspinall, the legendary Beatles roadie that eventually became a businessman for Apple Corps, the Beatles company. Quite controversial. Should they be considered the fifth Beatle? Nah, I don't think so. Now, let's see what Paul McCartney said. Well, he said 2 different things actually. In 1997, he said that if anyone should be considered the fifth Beatle, it would have to be the manager of the Beatles, Brian Epstein. However, on 2016, after George Martin's death, he said that if anyone should be considered the fifth Beatle, it would have to be producer George Martin. So who is it, Paul? Okay, so who do you think was the fifth Beatle? As I said, no one was, it's just like a made-up title, really. But in my opinion, well, it wouldn't be Billy Preston, he was a great keyboard player and he played in some of the songs. But that's it, that wouldn't make him the fifth Beatle. And it wasn't Peter Best, because even though he was a Beatle at some point, well, he got kicked out, right? Was it Stuart? Well, I don't know, I don't think so. He wasn't in the band when the band actually got famous and they created all the albums that we loved. So maybe not him. Which leaves us with George Martin and Brian Epstein. Tough choice because I think they were both very, very important to the Beatles' success. However, if I have to say, I think George Martin should be considered the fifth Beatle because We love the Beatles because of their music, and George Martin was really involved with the Beatles music. Of course, he was the producer, he wrote all the orchestral arrangements, he played piano and keyboard, and he guided them to be the band that we all know and love. So yeah, in my opinion, the fifth Beatle is George Martin. But who am I to say? You know, I'm just a guy on the internet. Who do you think was the fifth Beatle and why? Please let me know in the comments. By the way, don't get angry, okay? Just let me know who do you think was the fifth Beatle. Anyways, this is pretty much it. Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. You can also follow me on Instagram or Facebook. There is a PayPal link for donations. Of course, every donation will be absolutely appreciated. And the most important thing is, if you like this video, please make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel and you check out my other videos because they are all about the Beatles. So if you like the Beatles, you're definitely gonna find them interesting. Thank you so much for watching until the end. See you next time. Bye.
Well, I'm afraid that's us run out of time.
Oh,
I'm really
okay.
sorry.
Oh,
So,
bye everyone.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
If I give my heart to you, I must be sure from the very